Hello, everybody. It's me, Will, and I'm dusting off an old show concept that I had a few years ago, which I called "The Joy of Writing." The joke is that writing is usually a very, very, very intense, frustrating process for me. um, but so yeah, I'm curious to see how this plays out. I wonder if this is something that people have any interest in tuning in for. Um, I In the past few weeks, I think like a lot of people, I've been really sort of like frustrated and hitting a wall, and I don't know, struggling to keep myself feeling sane. And through it all, I came up with this idea for a short horror story that I honestly didn't really know um, what to do with. And ultimately, I decided that for my own sanity, I had to uh, just make it a real thing. I just had to write it as quickly as possible and put it on the internet. And so last night, I was going to use the word published. I posted a short story that I wrote called "The Woman on the 13th Floor" over on Medium, and there's a link in the show notes for this episode right now. And it's interesting, without a doubt. I spent all day yesterday agonizing over bits and pieces of this story, really struggling to um, decide where it was supposed to go. And ultimately, the only way that I could really convince myself to finish it rather than agonize over it for weeks or months and maybe risk never actually finishing it at all was to give myself a deadline. Um, and so there you go. I posted online that, hey, maybe I'll post a short horror story tomorrow, meaning this morning. And the fear was born, the fire was created, and I got it done. So, yeah. Hey, Michelle. Good afternoon. Jennifer says, hi. My twin brother and sister are named Tom and Mary. Funny coincidence. That is funny. That's weird. And Mom, hello. Yeah, it's a fun, weird story that is it was really born out of my wife and I watched the movie Rear Window a couple of weeks ago. I think I must have seen it as a child. I definitely knew the concept. There's a photographer played by Jimmy Stewart whose leg is broken. He's trapped at home. He has nowhere to go. The only thing that he does to occupy his time is stare out the rear window of his apartment into this beautiful New York City courtyard, which I don't think really exists, but I just did the same thing. And he gives nicknames to all the people in the building across the way. So there's a dancer that he calls Miss Torso. There's a lonely woman that he refers to as Miss Lonely Hearts. And they're all these figures that he doesn't know personally, but he certainly has an odd relationship to them just by watching them. And without really spoiling Rear Window, it's an Alfred Hitchcock movie. Somebody dies and something scary happens, and it becomes this odd paranoia story about, how can I possibly do anything to help when I'm trapped all the way over here? But my experience watching the movie was really strange. Obviously, we're living in the quarantine times right now, and when we first put on the movie, so much of it just made an immediate kind of sense to me. Jimmy Stewart is locked down at home alone. He only talks to people through the phone for the first, 20 minutes or something like that. As he looks across the courtyard to all of these people, they're all alone as well. Miss Torso is always dancing in her apartment by herself. I almost took her dancing in her apartment. I don't think I really consciously thought this, but I immediately just assumed, oh, she's dancing in her apartment by herself because she's not able to go to work. So she has to practice her dancing at home. Miss Lonely Hearts is lonely down there for a multitude of reasons, one of which is that she's not able to go out and meet anybody. Even married couples, for the opening 15 minutes of that movie, only see each other in their apartments. It's not until all of a sudden I think Miss Torso ends up having a couple of visitors over to her apartment that I got this icky feeling like, ugh, other people in your home? That's not supposed to happen. And then I realized how sort of warped my worldview had become because of the quarantine. And I started thinking about a story that was certainly a Rear Window. There's no denying the influence or possible lift of some of the concepts there. but this idea of being stuck inside here, and not being able to help as you see something through the window. It's a fear that I've had all my life of people watching me. And I think it really sort of, I don't know, speaks to, I think probably what we're all feeling. And then obviously coupled with that, I put a demon in there. There's more to say about the demon, but it's just funny to be like, yeah, I had a great idea. The Rear Window, all these deep thoughts I have about Rear Window. Also, I put a demon in there. But anyway. Hello, Brittany Brooks. Yeah, no, I don't know if any of you have actually read the story. I posted a link in the notes for this video if you have any interest in reading it. I think that what I'm going to do here today is try to sink back into the story itself. I'm going to try to read it, literally read it out loud, almost like an audiobook. I might stop and start. I might flub some lines and then have to go back and redo them. But I do think that I would ideally like to have this story exist in a few different ways. Last night I posted it on a website called Medium. Kristen, my sister, suggested that I post it there because I guess a lot of people browse that site. But I also think that maybe I'd like to submit it to the No Sleep subreddit, which is a little forum where people post their own scary stories. And maybe if I record a decent enough sounding, quote unquote audiobook version of this story, I might even submit it to the No Sleep podcast and see if they have any interest in taking it and playing it. And maybe Kristen will even let me play it on Guide to the Unknown. Who knows? But it's interesting. My relationship to writing is odd, especially in the last few years. I've never really written a short story. This is honestly the first real short story I've ever written. Especially working for Hunt a Killer, most of what I do is write scripts. And this is certainly not a script. I wanted to try something that was a little bit out of my comfort zone and out of my wheelhouse. And I think that there are, to various degrees, I think sometimes it worked. I think sometimes it didn't work. But we're going to sink into that now. Even still, this morning, last night I felt really accomplished having published it. I definitely felt like for my own mental health, this helped to make me feel like I was really doing something. Really, I think the only thing that I care about is storytelling and writing. And I have really awesome stuff that I'm doing for Hunt a Killer that's not going to come out for a few months. So I've got this burning itch in me to get something online. I haven't published any of my own writing since like August, when I did this short form horror podcast for Hunt a Killer called The Long Hallway. And so I've really been itching to do this and procrastinating and not doing it and punishing myself for not writing. But finally, it was really Allie who, yesterday I was down here ostensibly to write, but just playing Tony Hawk. And she really sort of pushed me to be like, you said you wanted to write. I really think you should try writing. And I came upstairs and just went for it. So let me check out the chat here a little bit. Hey, Kristen says, hey, buds. Yeah, No Sleep is exactly what else I wanted to suggest. Also, Let's Not Meet and the No Sleep pods. Yeah, for sure. I definitely feel like, I don't know. It's hard to grade your own work, but there are large chunks of what I wrote that I really enjoy, and I hope other people might like it too. Michelle says, it was strange when I started reading and I had to wonder if it was taking place during quarantine. Not a critique, just a weird thought I didn't realize I would have. Yeah, I think maybe I'll get into that as I read the story. I think I'm going to read the story and maybe do little bits of like commentary here and there. I might pause and do little asides to explain why certain things are the way that they are. I'm not going to claim that every decision I made in there is the right one, and I think the quarantine references are one of the odd things that are possibly underdeveloped. Mom says magic with a million asterisks. Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to get some revenge for you, Mom. I don't know. I fully admit that was like bloodlust to get revenge for you. Dory Mew says, love The Long Hallway. Jennifer says, Long Hallway was enjoyable in little bites. Yeah, thank you all. The Long Hallway was the first show that I fully directed myself. And actually, I'm assuming that people know who I am, which I'm seeing a lot of familiar names in the chat as I record this live. But maybe just for the people who have no idea who I am or what I'm talking about, I'm amazed that you've gotten this far, by the way. But I'm Will Rogers. I am a producer at Hunt a Killer, and I am a writer, performer, and director, storyteller. I don't know. I am one of the creators and co-hosts of the podcast Guide to the Unknown, which I host with my sister Kristen, where every Friday we talk about monsters and urban legends and pop culture and the horror influences that pop up in our everyday lives. As I just mentioned, I directed and wrote several episodes of the podcast The Long Hallway. We referred to this as a flash fiction podcast. Every episode is under 10 minutes. And in addition to directing each episode, I also wrote the episodes The Lighthouse, The Warehouse, and I don't know why, but I think I maybe wrote another. I also voice acted in a couple of those, which you might hear me do the little cameos, mostly out of necessity. I'm one of the associate producers on Earthbreak with Jenny Slate. This is the first podcast that ever got premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival. The real thing that I was proud of here was that I really pushed for us to record this one on location to get the sound to be as real as humanly possible. I was there from the beginning. I worked on all the scripts with the writer Morgan Ormond, but I did not write this show. But I am tremendously proud of it. I think it is by far the most professional and best sounding production I've been associated with. And I got my start in professional writing with this podcast, Blackwood, which is about 3 kids in a small town called Blackwood, Connecticut, who are investigating a Jersey Devil type local legend, a little cryptid. And spoiler alert, things go horribly wrong. Things also go horribly wrong in The Woman on the 13th Floor, the story that I pushed out into the world last night. So why don't I'm gonna bring that up here so that we can all look at it together. And let's see how this goes. Yeah. Woman on the 13th Floor. Maybe I'll put my face over on this side. Is that right? Why does it seem weird? Why is this like off center? Maybe I should also zoom in a little bit. Could have practiced this ahead of time, I suppose. All right. So The Woman on the 13th Floor. Let's get into this. I'm going to read a bit of this, and again, I might stop here and there to make notes, make some alterations, because I've already got a few things in mind that I might want to change. Yeah, we'll just see how it goes. And yeah, thank you all so much for the kind words about the other shows. So, all right. Oh, and now I feel really vulnerable. It's so funny. I was so proud of the story, and now having it out on the internet, I'm like, oh, there are a few things that I want to change. And now that I'm even going live with it, trying to push through that weird feeling, I'm like, oh, I'm about to like almost act live, because I do want to make an audiobook. Maybe this won't be the recording that becomes the audiobook, but we'll see. All right, let's see. I caught her staring at me again. What? Mary's voice came through groggily. Tom realized he must have woken her up. The woman on the 13th floor, he clarified. She's probably in love with you, Mary added as her typical sarcastic self crept back to life. She yawned, clearly stretching around to consult a clock, finally admonishing, It's almost 1 a.m. Like that was late for her. Mary was Tom's ex-girlfriend, a writer who didn't write. For that matter, so was he. It wasn't uncommon for them to be staring at their laptops until sunrise, for what good it did them. Neither had been published in years. So that's almost a weird reference to the fact that I feel like I haven't gotten to put anything online in a while. I almost think that some of the motivation of these characters is underdeveloped or not on the page, but I think that Mary and Tom are in their own little worlds. I think that they are unaware of things going on around them because all they do is navel gaze and argue with each other. And so that makes them unaware of this demonic plague that's coming their way. Derek says, didn't know I was a writer. Yeah. I've got all these shows out there. I don't know. I don't talk about them all the time because I typically feel really, who wants to hear me keep going like, hey, remember when I wrote Blackwood a few years ago? But I'm really proud of that show, and I don't know. I just want people to hear it. I feel like it represents a really fun start, and certainly not where I want to conclude my writing. Living together became a nightmare as they turned their skills on each other. constantly attempting to edit what the other was saying, picking apart each word choice, endlessly questioning the motive of every statement. Finally, Mary rented a new apartment across the courtyard. She'd been watching the young couple move their things into boxes, and the day they left she pounced, knowing the apartment wouldn't stay empty for long. She wondered if they'd bought a house in the suburbs. Two things there. One, Mary and Tom picking each other apart, every single word, every single meaning. That's what I do to myself. When I can't sleep at night, I will literally just like berate myself for not being able to come up with good ideas. Mary and Tom arguing is literally me arguing with myself. Also, that young couple is probably moving out of New York because there's a demonic plague coming. Jennifer Regan says, short stories can be difficult. I've written very few and none I shared publicly. You have to balance grabbing the attention and not over-explaining things and making the story too long. I completely agree. This turned out to be a really, really fun struggle. I definitely think that I would like to do more of this and hopefully get better the further that I go. Jennifer also says, I still have to check out Blackwood. What am I waiting for? I think I'll make it a goal to listen to an episode by the week's end. Oh, that'd be cool. That'd be very fun. Yeah, and I'd be very curious to hear what you think. I definitely consider that show to be a sort of a beginning of who I presently am. The breakup was organic. Tom and Mary simply stopped seeing one another. 5 years later, though, and they still couldn't leave each other alone. The temptation to gaze out the window into the other's apartment overwhelmed. Typically, one of them would try to date someone new, only to get the mocking texts from across the courtyard. They'd try to outdo themselves with each text, and began bringing strangers home just to see what the other had to say about them. The relationship had finally become manageable, and, apart, they were inseparable. Tom fired his retort into the mouthpiece. Yeah, why do you think I'm calling you? Go upstairs and get her number for me. Oh, great idea, Mary quipped, taking a deep breath to add. I'm gonna go talk to her. The first time Tom had seen the woman was just a few weeks ago, right before the lockdown. It was one of those nights where you can just feel every drop of moisture in the air. The humidity was making it so hard to breathe, it seemed everyone on the courtyard was praying for a storm to come break the oppressive heat. Their collective wish was granted with a vengeance. Not only did the rain come to wash out the smothering humidity, but it carried all the electrical power out with it. The lights fizzled and died, the air conditioner breathed its last breath. And as Tom lunged for his phone, he realized he stupidly hadn't kept the damn thing charged. With precious few percentage points of power to occupy his time, Tom estimated he had perhaps 20 minutes. He made the most of it, pushing the screen with his thumb as his eyes greedily gobbled up the light. Just more paranoid pieces about some vague, incomprehensible virus and the importance of avoiding all contact. Don't even so much as look at each other, cried one doctor in a video. No information made its way through to Tom's brain, though. Instead, his mind was elsewhere, worrying about how stuffy his small apartment was about to become without the AC. Pause. So right there, two things. One, I'm going to make a note. I think Tom worrying about the AC is less important than him being distracted from getting good information because his mind is either on Mary or his inability to write something. I think he needs to be a little more selfishly looking inward. More about worrying about Mary. I think that the reason that he is ignorant to what's going on is going to be because of a personality flaw rather than just worrying about the heat. Moving to crack a window, he saw it as soon as he opened the blinds. What the... With a flash of lightning, she was gone. My wife Allie's in the chat. She wrote, don't look at us. Yeah, don't talk to us either. Oh my God. When we were in Iceland last year, you know, we rented a car and then you drive around for like truly 8 hours. Iceland is beautiful. There's also, you know, huge fields of really nothing happening at all in between the sights to see. And really the only thing to distract us periodically was you'd see a farm with a bunch of sheep. That was really it. Just sheep periodically off in the distance. And we were so hungry for something to look at that anytime we saw them, we go, look, sheep. And it became an inside joke for the sheep to yell back, don't look at us. Yeah, don't talk to us either. There's one thing to look at, and it tells you not to look at it. Anyway. It was so dark out there. Maybe he was seeing things. Tom bunched up some towels on the sill to catch any inbound rain and pulled open the window. Cool air flooded into the room as if his apartment were some sealed tomb, finally unearthed after thousands of years. He barely had a moment to enjoy it before another flash of lightning brought his attention back to the roof across the yard. He wasn't seeing things. There she was. She was silhouetted against the night sky, backlit by the moon. About the only thing Tom could make out was how tense she was. She held her arms out at her sides like a bear reared up on its hind legs to intimidate, like a professional wrestler sizing up their opponent, like a child pretending to be the Incredible Hulk. The rain beat down on her. He stood by the window staring at the woman for several minutes. She was so still he wondered whether or not it was actually a person at all. Maybe it was some sort of cardboard cutout, or a scarecrow. Every New York City high-rise needs a scarecrow. Just then, his phone buzzed to life. He answered reflectively. Scary night, isn't it? With the rain and all, it's like right out of a horror movie, or, hey, there's a woman on the roof of your apartment. Tom interrupted, still staring without blinking. What do you mean, like she's gonna jump? More like the mothership just dropped her off. It's probably just the wizard trying to get away from her nightmare child. Pause. Scary night, isn't it? With the rain and all, it's like right out of a horror movie. I think we all should get the reference at this point. This is one of the first things that Ghostface says to Sidney. Except instead of with the rain and all, it's with the murders and all. Tom and Mary had given nicknames to each other's neighbors. The wizard was Mary's upstairs neighbor on the 5th floor. She spent all day chasing after some little creature that jumped around the apartment, thudding onto the floor with every landing. All Mary ever heard was the wizard screaming, "Magic? No! No magic!" Mary thought it was a dog until Tom told her it was actually a little boy. The noise drove Mary insane. Tom also knew from Mary's descriptions that there was a bodybuilder she called the Terminator living just below him. He found it comforting to have a killer robot so close. No, I don't think so. Tom and Mary came to refer to this mysterious figure as the woman on the 13th floor, since Mary's building only went up to 12. As horror devotees, they always wondered whether or not the original architects had been given the order to stop building before they hit the dreaded number. We're going to pause there again. This line has lost all context for me. So much happens between it's probably the wizard trying to get away from her nightmare child that I forgot what the hell we were talking about by the time we got here. This needs to recontextualize. We're questioning if the woman is is actually someone they know. So this line needs to become something like, no, I don't think, I have no idea who that is. Something like that. I think there's something else in here that I wanted to call out. Oh, Tom and Mary had given nicknames to each other's neighbors. The wizard was Mary's upstairs neighbor on the 5th floor. Struggled so much with this name. Sometimes she was Miss Wizard, sometimes she was Mrs. Wizard. I still don't really like the name. But I do like that she screams magic, no, no magic, so they call her a wizard. But the sort of discovery process of that is backwards. You know she's called the wizard, but you eventually find out why. It doesn't really make sense. The other thing is, Miss Wizard, the wizard, lives above Mary on the 5th floor, which means that Mary lives on the 4th floor, which I think it's in Japan, the number 4, the word for the number 4 is the same as the word for death. Nobody would catch that. I just liked it. Tom and Mary came to refer to this mysterious figure as the woman on the 13th floor. Oh, I just read that. At first, they simply assumed the woman on the 13th floor was homeless. Tom had never seen her climb down, but now that he noticed her... What? Maybe I have a problem here, too. Tom had never seen her climb up there, but now that he noticed her, he realized that she never seemed to climb down. During the day, he never saw her, but almost every night he'd catch her at some point. She was always doing the same thing. Nothing. Just standing and staring down the side of the building, tense and still. Maybe she has a tent up there or something. Mary just didn't want to go check herself. Tom found himself finally writing again, imagining this woman's life. Sometimes she was a superhero, listening in case someone might cry out for help. Other times she was a demon, staring down at the city with ravenous intent, scanning the ground for her next meal. His stories seldom got past the first 3 pages. We're literally at the bottom of page 3 here. This is a nod only to me. Over the weeks, Mary placated him, but it was clear she was becoming less interested than he was. "I feel like if you could just see her, you'd understand why I'm so obsessed," he finally said one afternoon. "Ew, stop trying to lure me into your apartment, creep." He smiled at the insult like it was the greatest compliment he'd ever received. It wasn't what he'd meant to offer, but he also didn't regret it. After a moment's silence, Mary's voice came back through the phone again. "What time should I come over?" That night they ordered pizza and watched The Woman on the 13th Floor. And, as predicted, Mary was hooked. It became a ritual. Friday night, pizza, wine, and The Woman on the 13th Floor. Their life together began to repair. They were functional, united in their complete confusion over what the woman could possibly be doing, what she could be looking for. What was she thinking? And then it happened. The evening before the lockdown, Tom came home from gathering supplies. Water, toilet paper, and enough food to ensure he wouldn't need to leave for a while. People at the store wore masks and sunglasses, dramatically avoiding looking at each other. He'd wanted to ask Mary if she would stay locked down with him, but he didn't summon the courage to offer, and she certainly didn't ask. As he set a dozen eggs on the counter, he saw for the first time someone else on the roof across the yard. Maybe the building's manager. A tenant, perhaps. He had no idea, but he left the rest of his groceries unpacked to watch from the window. The sun was just setting, casting an orange glow. The stranger had propped the roof access door open with a brick. Where was the woman? With his luck, she was hiding from the visitor, away on some mission, or just gone altogether. Tom realized he was disappointed she wasn't there. He wanted to see what she'd do now that someone else. He wanted to see what she'd do now that someone else had set foot on her rooftop. Able to see more clearly by the window, Tom thought this new person might be a meter reader or some sort of utility worker. They were definitely inspecting something. Every now and then they'd jot down some notes into a little tablet in their hand. It was several minutes before Tom realized how uninteresting it was to watch a public works employee do their job from 500 feet away. Just as he turned to go back to the kitchen, though, Tom saw her. She had been there the whole time. Barely visible, she stood behind the bulkhead. He could make out part of her form, partially obscured by the door back into the building. Tom watched as she glared at the man. He was too far away to see the expression on her face, but as the utility worker walked back and forth on the roof, her head bobbed to follow his every move. She seemed to be transfixed by him. Tom dialed for Mary, but she didn't answer. His eyes shifted from the woman down 9 floors to Mary's apartment window. Didn't look like she was home. Probably getting supplies of her own. Stupid. They should be pooling resources. They should be together. When Tom looked back to the roof, he found the spot where the woman had been, but she was gone. He couldn't understand why, but a sick feeling developed in his stomach as he searched for the utility worker. Finally, Tom located the man. He was bent double, examining some sort of vent. And there was the woman. She was approaching him from behind. Tom had never seen her in motion before. She moved unnaturally, as if she wasn't stable on her own feet. There was a wobble to the way she walked, almost like a newly born deer learning to use its body for the first time. An animal instinct reared up inside Tom. He felt like a mouse seeing a snake. Tom couldn't have put it into words, but he knew the man was in danger. His hands flew to the latch and he yanked open the window, calling out in vain, "Behind you!" The utility worker clearly didn't hear the warning. He continued his examination of the roof as the woman hobbled nearer. "Hey! Hey! Look out!" It was impossible. Her arms reached out, twitching uncomfortably. Desperately. She was starting to move faster now. She was nearly there. Tom opened his mouth as wide as possible and bellowed. This time, he made no attempt to form words. He tried only to battle the ambient sound of New York City. He could think of no other option. Maybe it came through sounding like nonsense. Maybe it was barely louder than a whisper by the time it hit the utility worker's ears. But the man looked up. He seemed confused, searching around for the source of the noise. Tom waved his arms madly, trying to get the man's attention. Finally, he did. He got someone else's attention, too. The woman froze in place. She no longer seemed interested in the utility worker, who punched some small numbers. Some small numbers. 2, 1, small numbers. Some coffee. How is this? Is this weird, by the way? Is this weird or is this enjoyable? Should I keep going or never do this again? All right. The woman froze in place. She no longer seemed interested in the utility worker, who punched some numbers into a small iPad and gradually headed back to the exit, pulling the... long sentences. These are some long sentences. Pulling open the door and disappearing down into the building. Clearly, he decided that Tom was some lunatic unworthy of his attention. Tom could see the man through the windows into the stairwell, heading back downstairs to safety. He didn't matter anymore. The woman's blank expression and hollow eyes were pointed only at that strange little thing in the distance. That thing that yelled at her and stole away her victim. Tom. He could almost hear her thoughts. "You can see me." His blood ran cold. She was staring at him now. She had noticed him, and she wouldn't look away. They remained locked, as if connected, from her roof to his apartment, a connection stretching across the courtyard, broken only by the sudden buzzing of his phone. Mary. With some effort, Tom broke the connection, shut the blinds, and answered the phone, relating the frantic story to Mary, who was walking back home from the grocery store. Whoa, 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 slow down, Mary urged him. So you're telling me, what you're telling me, she sounded as nervous as he was, is that nothing happened? She was making fun of him. Bone chilling. 2 things. One thing. Hey, Bobby. Bob says this is great. Michelle says enjoyable. Bob says keep going, sweet Willie. Thank you. So 2 things. I say here that the connection is broken by the buzzing of a phone, and then I say with some effort, Tom broke the connection. So the connection breaks twice. It doesn't make sense. A connection stretching across the courtyard. I think Tom has to break the connection. Or is it the phone? Does the phone break the connection? Tom tore himself away. Right? You can't break that connection twice. What's more interesting? So I'm going to start tipping my hand here. I don't really know what the demonic curse is, but it has something to do with eye contact. I think it has something to do with right now, really the only thing that we all have is the ability to speak to each other and occasionally see each other on the internet. I wanted to remove even that. So it's all about he becomes connected to this demon, and she's able to sort of like feed off of him a little bit, or she's self-actualized by the act of him seeing her. Maybe it's even the fact that like I don't really, something in me activates even right now being on camera. Is it that? Is it the idea of somebody looking at you, giving you energy? I think it might be. So I think that has to be broken. I think he should be weak and unable to break it himself. I think the phone breaks the connection. So I'll leave it like this. All right. The next morning felt different instantly. Waking up with the knowledge that leaving isn't an option has a way of shrinking even the largest living space. This sentence is breaking the fourth wall in a way I'm uncomfortable with. But I still need to explain why the morning felt different. The next morning, Tom felt himself. Yeah. I don't want to make some universal proclamation about what quarantine is for all of us. It's weird. All right. Poking through the blinds, he opened a small gap to peek out. She was still there, watching him. He couldn't tell if she had moved at all. It felt likely that she hadn't moved an inch since they first locked eyes with each other. He backed away, letting the blinds flop into place. Tom felt exposed, unsafe. Each time he looked through the blinds, there she was. When it stretched late into the night, that's when Tom couldn't bear it anymore. He dialed Mary, needing to talk to someone outside. I caught her staring at me again, is where we opened the story. It took some time to truly activate Mary. She didn't usually sleep deeply, but once she did, it was impossible to get her full attention. I'm going to go talk to her, came the eventual solution. Sometimes it was hard for Tom to realize when Mary was joking, but now he felt relieved to laugh at the situation. Except she wasn't kidding. Through the phone, Tom listened as Mary slid out of bed and turned on the light. He could see the light blink to life across the yard. Light is repeated too frequently here. And flicked the light switch. Sometimes it's as small as just feeling like the same word appears too many times. Jennifer says, maybe explain to the reader the eye contact connection, because I didn't realize that was a thing when I read it alone. Yeah, well, that's interesting too. I think you're right. I think there needs to be more of it here, but I almost didn't want to. I don't think Tom gets to understand. You know, I don't think Tom gets to learn why this is happening, and I also don't want the dramatic irony of knowing that he's doomed. I don't know. I'm torn on that. There's also like that movie and book, Pontypool, where, spoiler alert, an alien virus can be contracted through words, not through biting, through language. And so I wanted this to also be a sort of impossible, the shared connection, this thing bleeding into each other. I think that the woman is feeding off of Tom seeing her, and I think that he is gradually losing bits and pieces of himself by sending his energy to her through that eye contact, which is weird. I don't know, but I agree with you. I think there ought to be more of it here somewhere. Through the phone, Tom listened as Mary slid out of bed and flicked the light switch. He could see the light blink to life across the yard, and he wandered to the window as he muttered through the phone, "You're joking." "Nope, not joking. If it'll get you to chill out once and for all, I'm going to go find out what the deal is." Tom felt numb, knowing it was impossible to change Mary's mind. He could only blurt out, "Don't go up there." Mary was standing in her kitchen, looking exasperated. "What do you think she's doing up there, Tom? Really? What could she possibly be up to?" Far away in the kitchen, Tom saw Mary staring back at him. Unlike the way the woman on the 13th floor looked at him, Mary's attention felt alive. There was no answer. No good, clean, rational answer. So instead, he said nothing. Tom turned his attention up 9 stories to the top of the building and was unsurprised to see the woman still watching him. A death stare, hungry and bottomless. He connected with her briefly and regretted it. Mary must have already been in the hall. By the time Tom looked back to her apartment, he couldn't see her. Through the phone, he heard the elevator doors opening. "Mary, please, I'm begging you. I know it's crazy, just please don't go up there. I have a bad feeling." Her voice came out through the phone, crackling electronically as the elevator doors closed. "I can't think of another way to get this out of your head," was the last thing he heard before the line went dead. Tom stared at the brick exterior of the building, imagining Mary inside the elevator, rising up to the 12th floor. She'd have to take the stairs from there. 2 things. One of the things that I really struggled with here was I wanted to keep Mary on the phone. I think that, but I didn't want her to be able to hear him. It's weird. I wanted Tom to know what Mary was up to by the sounds coming through the phone, hearing the light switch, hearing the elevator doors, knowing what must be happening, but not being able to see it. Because from his vantage point, he's just staring at a brick building at this point. But I also liked, I started thinking about this like a movie or something, and following his eye line, tracking up the building as we just hear that very, recognizable, mechanical noise of the inside of an elevator. But Mary and Tom aren't really speaking to each other. Um, it just made less sense. As fun as it was, it made less sense for him to be able to hear her, but she can't hear him, because I didn't want him to be able to stop her. I didn't really want them to be able to talk to each other. I just wanted him to hear what she was going through, and have that sound be clean by him while she's 500 feet away across the courtyard. But it didn't make sense for them not to be constantly talking to each other. And any electrical sort of like, oh, the phone doesn't work right anymore, but we're still going to stay on the line together, felt implausible. So I cut it. But I really liked that. There was something Blair Witchy about the sound. The sound is being captured separately from where the video is being captured. Not that you're seeing a video of this, but whatever. Okay. He shifted his gaze to the windows along the stairwell, finally catching as Mary came in through a heavy metal door. She walked straight to the window, gesturing to Tom far away that her phone stopped working. Powerless, he watched as Mary climbed the staircase, finally reaching the roof. The 13th floor. The woman didn't move a muscle as Mary approached. Tom yanked open his window again, staring intently as Mary seemed to question the woman from 6 feet away, because we're supposed to all stay 6 feet away. Derek says, maybe have her pull the phone away from her ear as she's using that same hand, doing things, or just holding the phone by her side. Yeah. I also wanted him to call the police. I think I just wanted too many things to happen here. If I were in the position of filming this or something like that, I might be able to more visually clearly sell the idea that she's holding the phone but not really using it. But in the story, it felt contrived to explain it. It felt like writing in this format. And again, is this like just what it is to write in a new format, which I'm used to writing scripts. I might have put that in direction in a script and felt good about it. But here, I felt like I had to explain why she's not using the phone properly, and it felt like telling instead of showing. He tried to call Mary's phone again, but it wouldn't go through. So instead, he dialed 911, kicking himself for not doing it earlier. Mary wasn't making any progress. Tom saw her gesturing as she spoke to the woman, who still hadn't taken her sunken eyes off Tom. 911, what is your emergency? Hi, I'm, Mary theatrically shrugged. Mary theatrically wow! Mary theatrically shrugged in Tom's direction, signaling some message of, who knows? With that, she turned to leave, heading back to the door. I'm calling to report that... Sir? He gave Mary's address instinctively, not even aware he was doing it. Staring up at the roof, Mary was almost to the door before the woman shambled toward her. Her limbs jostled loosely in their sockets as if they were barely connected, and her blank face finally turned away from Tom to focus on her new prey. Mary, run! It was hopeless. Mary heard nothing, but the woman's head reacted to the call, turning abruptly to gaze at Tom as her arms wrapped around Mary from behind. Sir? The phone fell from Tom's hand, forgotten, as he watched in horror. The woman was staring at him, possibly attempting to understand his reaction. It wrenched Mary violently, pulverizing. Her arms moved wildly, sometimes clutching Mary's shoulders, other times worming their way up to Mary's neck and head. He felt his sanity bending. The movement was sickening. It made no sense. The woman seemed to enjoy the struggle. But all right. I'm getting lost here. Partially because the way the woman kills Mary doesn't make any... It's not purposeful, in like a thematic sense. If this story is about like shared connections, I think it's weird for the woman to be killing Mary from behind rather than face to face. I also think it's not gross and scary enough. Again, this is almost like a cinematic direction that I would want to give actors or something. I want this creature, I want this woman to be moving. I want there to be the implication that she's acting on some sort of instinct that maybe she doesn't even fully understand. I think this woman is devoid of life, personality, or purpose. She only knows that Mary has something that she needs. I also think that for the shock of how brutal the woman is and what she's been trying to do this whole time, you know, is this what the woman would have done to the utility worker if Tom had not intervened? I think that the woman, I think there needs to be some sort of an eyeball thing. Is sort of what I'm driving at. I think that the woman needs to grab Mary and be squeezing her and choking her, but then turn her around and get at Mary in the, like, whatever ultimate, fatal way through the eyes. Jennifer asks, can Mary see the demon woman? We know Tom can, and she was bewildered that Tom could. Mary's shrug made me assume that Mary couldn't see the woman. Oh, see, yeah. No, well, that's interesting. In my head, Mary can absolutely see the woman. The woman is real, right? Like, and I think by the end of this story, we're going to realize that she probably used to be human. But I don't think that the creature even knows what it needs or wants. Yeah, Michelle, yeah, I think Mary can see her, but the woman just isn't reacting to Mary. Correct. Yeah, I think that the woman is focused on Tom, and through Tom's reactions to things is learning about the world in a way. I think that there's this notion that I've always sort of enjoyed that is really kind of gross and weird. You ever hear that serial killer test where it goes something like at her uncle's funeral, a young woman meets a man who she'd never met before, and they instantly hit it off. But then, by the time the funeral is over, they haven't traded details or anything like that. A week later, the young woman kills her aunt. Why? And it's supposed to test you to see whether or not you think like a serial killer. And the answer, the quote-unquote correct answer, is that she killed the aunt thinking, well, hey, maybe this guy will show up to that funeral and I can meet him again. Like, murder is really only a means to an end. I think that the real thing that the woman is trying to feed on is this connection with Tom. And Tom will keep paying attention to her if she kills. Is the woman wearing anything? I imagine her in torn up, ratty clothes. Yeah, that's how I imagine her too. There were a few times that I almost described what the woman looked like, but I just started to become really aware of, like, I don't know, the idea of, like, making women be monsters. And, I don't know. I was just recently writing about a banshee and how we consider old ladies to be scary and stuff like that. And the more that I physically described the woman, the less good I felt about it. And I figured maybe people might enjoy realizing that they had created their own mental image of her. Certainly by the end, I tried to describe Tom's body a little bit, and sort of what's happening to him. And through seeing what happens to Tom, you can probably even modify your mental image of the woman. So yeah, all that is to say, I think most of this is about Tom seeing it for the woman. I think this is about watching. I think he's named Tom, by the way, because he's a peeping Tom. Not in the not in the weirdo, pervert way, but like he's a watcher. He's stuck and he's staring out. So I think that the monster needs to do something to Mary through her eyes. It just feels thematically right. Let's see. Add something gross about eyeballs. I'll come back to this later. He felt his sanity bending. The movement was sickening. It made no sense. The woman seemed to enjoy the struggle, but her deadened face stared only at Tom. Not even her mouth registered any movement. No sneer. No smile. I'll definitely have to come back and re-record this because I'm going to change the writing. I just realized. He could see Mary struggling, screaming, though he couldn't hear a thing but his own blood pounding in his ears. That's when he broke. As his mind snapped, Tom's knees gave out from under him, and he collapsed to the ground. Somewhere in the distance he could hear the 911 operator calling for him. Somewhere closer, He sensed the woman's eyes drilling a hole into him. She knew how to get his attention now. As he lost consciousness, he thought of Mary, her twisted body on the roof, robbed of its life, drained and mummified. He was able to see it clearly. This was meant to at one point refer to literally being able to see through the woman's eyes because of their connection, which I dislike. I think I might just cut that. It has no real purpose. She just wanted to prove to him that there was nothing to worry about. He wished he'd asked her to stay with him during the lockdown. Tom didn't even see as the red and blue lights appeared and a young police officer investigated the call. The next day, there was no one on the roof. More police had come to investigate. Evidently, they couldn't locate the responding officer from last night. This is sort of hearkening back to and is debatably worth cutting. One of the original concepts for this story idea was that this Tom character was essentially watching the Grudge House from across the street and seeing Kayako and Toshio, murder everybody that went in. And at one point, I wanted to take it so far as to have more and more police show up to try to figure out what is going on in this house, only to get killed by Kayako and Toshio. And then eventually the army shows up. And then scientists show up. And they put like a tent over the house. But more people just end up getting killed for how much they try to research what the hell is going on in the Grudge House. And then the last moments of the story would be Tom seeing that they were going to try to demolish it. And thinking to himself, I wonder what else they'll build there now. Maybe that's almost the origin of this story. Maybe Mary's apartment building is built where a Grudge house used to be. I thought that was kind of a fun idea. Bob says, after you rewrite, you should close read. What do you mean? Clarify, please, Bob. Now. Tom sat catatonic, staring out his staring out his rear window, scanning the 13th floor for the woman. Go word by word, sentence by sentence? Yeah, I probably will. He was looking too high. She was one floor down in a man's apartment, some guy Tom had never bothered to pay attention to. As soon as he found her in the man's kitchen, as soon as she saw him watching, the woman pounced on this stranger, doing to him what she had done to poor Mary. All the way she remained connected to Tom, enjoying the act through his eyes. With Tom as a witness, the woman worked her way through the entire building from the top down. Each night a new victim. He didn't move, feeling rooted to the ground, helplessly staring through the window. It turned into a game. Sometimes he'd have to find her in the apartment windows. Other times he was able to pick the next victim just by casting a glance in their direction. She'd wander to the person he selected, growing steadier on her feet with each new kill. She took men, women, and children. The wizard and her son Magic put up a good fight, but even their frantic energy could do nothing to stave off the woman. This is where it becomes like a weird fairy tale. I'm not in love with this. Every now and then a new officer would appear, but they never stood a chance. By the week's end, rumors had become facts, and Tom could see more and more people leave their homes. They knew, but it didn't matter. They'd have to condemn the entire building to stop this. As the woman from the 13th floor continued her death march to the ground floor, floor times 2. Tom dimly noticed that even the bricks seemed to be losing their color, leached and dried, becoming increasingly covered in rot. One day his electricity shut off, but Tom didn't notice. The air grew stale around him, and his apartment was like an oven. A kiln. How do you pronounce kiln? Kiln. That's hard for me to say. A kiln. He didn't feel it as his skin dried, clinging tighter to his bones. The woman across the street stayed connected at all times. He could feel her watching him even when the diseased brick came between them. He felt comforted by the connection. It was his only nourishment. As the woman finally reached the bottom floor one day, Tom became aware of his own body again. He had no idea when he had last moved. His mouth was dry. His arms were heavy. The woman stepped outside for the first time on the ground floor. Tom attempted to stand to get a better look at her. She looked accomplished, healthy, possibly even thankful. The effort to stand knocked the wind out of Tom, The effort to stand knocked the wind out of Tom, though, and he nearly fell over, breaking eye contact with the woman as he tried to catch himself. Unsteadily returning to his feet, Tom desperately flung himself to the window to try and find the woman again, but he had lost her. Down on the ground, he could only make out the shapes of people milling about aimlessly. He couldn't feel her eyes anymore. The connection was lost. Not good. That night, the sky opened, and rain came pouring down to crush the awful heat, which was not set up. Tom realized how thirsty he was and rushed to the door, struggling to pull it open. His body was ruined and drained. His body was ruined and drained. He steadied himself against the wall as he made his way to the stairs. As Tom climbed to the roof, his mind was a maelstrom. The word came out strangely. He only remembered being lonely as an image of a woman floated in and out of focus. Somebody familiar. He saw her face frozen in a painful scream. Tom felt disconnected. Lost. The only person who could help him reconnect was somewhere outside, down on the ground. He needed to find her. He needed to reconnect. Rain pinged off the tin door to the roof, and Tom found himself outside for the first time in weeks or months, enjoying the rain as it washed down his sallow cheeks. He spread out his arms and enjoyed what he could. In a flash of lightning, the rest of his mind was gone, and out in the night, somebody saw him. There's something to the end here that doesn't feel finished or accomplished or complete or something, and I can't quite place my finger on it yet. But there you have it. That's the present, and I might just consider it the near, the second, the pre-final draft of The Woman on the 13th Floor. One of the driving motivators for getting this done at all is something that I read about in the book Bossy Pants by Tina Fey, which is one of the most motivating books I have ever read as a writer. Tina Fey describes Saturday Night Live and what it was like to work there. And she, explains that, of course, everybody, remembers their version of Saturday Night Live. You constantly hear people say, it's just not as good anymore. That's what people say about Saturday Night Live, week after week after week. And she goes on to describe why that might be the case. She says, do you know why the sketches on Saturday Night Live make it to air? It's not because they're perfect. It's because they're finished. There's a thing in writing, and I think this is true probably of all things. You could continue to work on the same thing forever. I could work on every sentence in this story for months and still not be completely satisfied with it. And Tina Fey described the writing process for SNL as, draft after draft after draft, trying to get it perfect, doing everything you can to get it perfect. But eventually, you have to stop. Not because it's done and ready, but because it's 11:30. And that's when the show starts. Without that motivating factor, nothing would ever be finished. The show has to start at some point. And last night, I decided that point was midnight. And I posted this story. And today, I'm looking back at it and by and large enjoying the majority of it. But there are certainly things about it that I think should change or aren't quite on point for what I want this to be. The biggest of which is, quite frankly, the ending. There are things here that don't feel earned. There are things about the ending that feel rushed. From Mary's death on, really, I think that something feels demonstrably different in this story. But I did it. There are most things I've written are not on the internet. Most things that I've worked on are not published, either because I hit a wall at some point or I fell out of love with them while writing. But I think there's an accomplishment in finishing something at all. And honestly, I think that the things that, at least the notes that I've made over the course of this live stream are actionable and things that I can do fairly quickly to get this story to the next level that I like. Beyond that, even the ending that I am puzzling over, I don't know if I want to work on that or consider it a lesson learned for a future story. Because honestly, I think it just needs to exist. I'll have to see where my mind sort of takes me once I close out this stream. What do I really want to do with this? For sure, I want to make the edits that I've noted here. Jennifer says the ending. Oh, what just happened to my monitor? That's interesting. Okay. Yeah, the ending. You made Tom and Mary have a strong connection, and all the while you've been talking about the demon and Tom's connection. When it says somebody saw him, I feel Tom has not enough mind to realize it's the demon, but it leaves it open to be some sort of interpretation of dead Mary seeing him. Oh, that's interesting. See, to me, the ending is there's just another person out there, and Tom is probably, the man on the 13th floor to somebody else. They're going to wonder what the hell he is, and the sort of spiral of this story will start over, which in some ways I find satisfying, and in some ways feels like a cop-out to just be like, oh, the beat goes on, it'll happen again. Somebody else saw him the way that he saw the woman. But also there's an undeniable influence in here of, we did an episode about J-horror on Guide to the Unknown, where we talked about some of the conceits of those stories, like The Ring and Uzumaki, things like that. And those stories are sort of all about, a single event that continues to perpetuate itself. And so the end of this story is really just the beginning of a repeat of it, except now Tom is the demon, and he's going to probably kill people. He's unsteady on his feet the way the woman is. She must have been human, but was, lost muscle mass watching some other thing on a roof somewhere, and lost all her humanity and eventually lost her mind. That's what I think it is, but I also love interpretations of things. Yeah, it's interesting. This has been fun. I feel like it's been a fun little challenge to write a horror story. It's something that, without a doubt, has been rattling around in my head for a while. This, Rear Window plus The Grudge. It's been fun trying to tackle it and get it out there, and have it just be a thing that people can have and like or dislike. I'm one of them. But for better or worse, it's a new story that I wrote that I finished and am going to try to learn from and see what else I can do next. Honestly, this has made me feel like there are other stories in the past that I've come up with that I haven't really tried to execute, that maybe now is the right time to be doing that. Certainly, as I said in the beginning, this was, like, by and large a mental health exercise to just feel like I'm doing something. Just feel like I can start and finish an idea again. Because I just haven't done it in so long. So yeah, thank you to everybody who read it and has been hanging out with me here as I sort of combed back through. I hope you enjoyed it, even if bits and pieces felt different. Like Michelle says here, I would agree that the end feels different than the rest of it. I really loved the final image, though. Gave me an uneasy feeling about the continuing of the cycle. Yeah, it's interesting, I think. Even the news report that he hears at the beginning, where a doctor at some point goes like, don't even look at anybody. that was, that's a phrase that people say to be, to exaggerate how important it is to to maintain social distancing or something like that. But it was also literal practical advice. I think that somewhere out there, nobody's believing it, but people are actually falling prey to like ocular eyeball connection demons. Tom wasn't paying attention. He was in his own little world about it. He didn't follow the rules, and so he sort of caught the infection. My mom says this is so interesting, so thank you. I got a mommy award. All right, everybody. I think I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all so much. Again, if you have any interest in like other things that I have done, please go check out Blackwood, the original audio drama that I wrote for Hunt a Killer, Earthbreak, which I'm one of the producers of, and took it really from start to finish. The Long Hallway, my first directorial effort in the audio drama game. I also wrote a few episodes and did some voice acting in there, which is somewhat unusual for me. And of course, Guide to the Unknown, coming out every single Friday. Literally, there's 2 brand new episodes dropped on this past Friday for you to go check out. If you enjoyed The Woman on the 13th Floor, I highly advise listening to our J-horror episode, where you can sort of hear some of the conventions that I tried to echo in this story. Kristen called them out. She read a draft of this yesterday and commented on like, oh, I caught the references to things being like wet and gross. I don't know. I tried to like work in some things that we learned on Guide to the Unknown into this story. Maybe you can catch some of them. Jennifer says, I love hearing the writer's point of view because there were so many themes that they miss. Mom says, the story in this collaborative presentation you enjoyed. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you all. I really appreciate the support. I hope that you enjoyed the story. I hope you enjoyed this oddball live stream. I think I will make these edits and then probably in the next couple of days record an audio version of the story. Maybe I'll submit it. Maybe I'll regret submitting it when I get the negative comments or something like that. But for now, I feel pretty good about it. So thank you all so much. Dorian Muse says, I'd love to read some more of your stories. Maybe I'll make that a thing. Maybe I'll try to do this again. I certainly felt good about it, and it felt great getting something out the door once and for all. I really think that I am sort of sustained by storytelling. I think that it is the thing that keeps my my brain operating and keeps me... It's like, in addition to my antidepressants, I think it's my antidepressant to storytell. So thank you all so much. I'll definitely see you again at some point in the future. Look out for more from me. Follow @TheMythTraveler on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Links to all the shows and everything in the show notes. Keep it spooky, everybody. And for now, thanks. And hey, have a great rest of the day. All right. Bye, everybody.